but it's all dollars that have been restricted to a particular purpose, which doesn't necessarily go for the benefit or can be utilized for the benefit of the overall fraternity. But nonetheless, it is a great accomplishment, and frankly, we still want to celebrate your good work and thank Carl and Jim again for your good work as campaign co-chairs. Thank you so much for what you've done. We appreciate it. It's now my privilege to introduce one of my fellow High Council members, and I'll have the opportunity over the next couple of days to introduce all of them individually. But the first one up is Charlie Idle, Vice Regent Charlie Idle, who is going to introduce our Maddox Honor Lecturer today. Charlie was initiated at Oklahoma State University as Epsilon 1096, and he's a member of the Sigma Nu Hall of Fame, into which he was inducted in Austin 2 years ago, based on his career achievements as the former CEO of Simmons Bedding and now the head of Idle & Armstrong, a firm that specializes in business turnarounds. Charlie presented the Maddox Honor Lecture, by the way, at Grand Chapter in 2008 when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I know that he talked about a concept that I think stuck with the collegians there, which was about the C's, connecting, communicating, character. And it was so interesting that he used those words that all fit together and made such a coherent story as to what the fraternity experience should all be about. I can think of nobody better to introduce our honor lecturer today than Brother Charlie Idle.
Thank you, Brother Regent. This is indeed a true honor to introduce to you the 18th President of Oklahoma State University, a brother of mine at that chapter, and his wife Ann, who is with us today, who he often calls the #1 cowgirl. So before I introduce the #1 cowboy, I thought I'd introduce the #1 cowgirl, Ann Hargis, if you could please stand. Knowing Burns, and as many times as I've heard him speak, I know he was going to say that, so I've already got your speech messed up, I guess. This is indeed an honor. I did have the opportunity to address the High Council 2 years ago, and I was telling Ann a while ago, you know, I really worked on that speech because I really wanted it to be appropriate. And Dr. Robert Maddox, who also is not from Oklahoma State. He was initiated at Gamma Epsilon, the Arkansas chapter, in 1942, but he taught at Oklahoma State University chemistry. He was a chapter advisor. He was there when I was there, when Burns was there. He was a very wonderful man, inducted into the Hall of Honor. He's a past regent, and Brother Maddox decided many years ago that he wanted this chapter, grand chapter, every other year to hear a distinguished individual come before you to talk about the values of Sigma Nu, talk about the values of honor and the principle of honor, and to bring before you an individual that exemplifies that. It was a great idea. He funded this for life, and so today is indeed my honor to introduce to you Burns Hargis, as I said, who's the 18th president of Oklahoma State University. Burns pledged in 1963. I remember when I was going through Rush, he had been the Rush chairman the year before. He was pledge trainer. Burns was and still is an icon, not only in Oklahoma, but throughout the world. He oversees one of the most comprehensive land grant universities in the country with 32,000 students, 7,400 employees, locations in Stillwater, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Okmulgee. Prior to becoming the president of Oklahoma State, Burns served as a board of regent. It was pretty easy when the job came open for the people involved in the selection committee to learn early on Burns Hargis was the perfect person to lead this wonderful university. Prior to that, he was vice chairman of Bank of Oklahoma, and prior to that, practiced law with McAfee and Taft in Oklahoma City for 28 years. He's a former president of the Oklahoma County Bar Association, the former president of the Oklahoma Bar Foundation, and is a fellow of the American Bar Foundation. By the way, you can follow along a little bit with this if you want to in page 6 of your program. Burns has served as vice chairman of Oklahoma State Election Board, the Oklahoma Constitutional Revision Commission, and served as chairman of the Oklahoma Commission for Human Services. He's a former member of the Commission of North Central Colleges and Schools, and it was a candidate for the governor of Oklahoma, a Republican candidate in 1990, and barely lost. Sorry, Burns. Burns is a firm believer in the power of imagination and collaboration. I've watched him firsthand lead Oklahoma State to new heights. He's truly one of the most wonderful individuals I have ever met. I've never seen a president of a university be so natural, approachable, cool, calm, collected, and be able to work for Boone Pickens at the same time. So with that, Burns, it's my honor to introduce you, the 18th president of Oklahoma State University and one of your brothers, Burns Hargis.
Thank you, Charlie. This is a real honor, but it's a tough job to lunch. That's usually, it's kind of like being a corpse at a funeral. You kind of have to have the speaker, but you don't want them to say much. Well, I just want to start by saying happy birthday, America. This is a great day, and we're in the best place we could possibly be. It's especially great to be back. Ann and I have been traveling in Italy and Turkey for the last couple of weeks, and to be, in fact, just came in from Istanbul, so if I doze off, I hope you'll forgive me, but it's good to be back on American soil. Those are great countries, great people, great food, but there's nothing like America. I bring you greetings from Oklahoma State University and Epsilon. It's been a lot in my life and Charlie's and many others in the room. I also bring you greetings from the Big 12, or maybe we're the Big 10. We have 10 schools, but we're called the Big 12. The Big 10 has 12 schools, but they're called the Big 10. Pac-10 has now 12 schools. The SEC is about the only one that stayed stable here. That was sort of a shameless applause line that I went for there. It is a privilege to give the Maddox Honor Lecture. I did know Bob Maddox. He was the chapter advisor at Epsilon. He was also head of the chemistry department, although I certainly never saw him there. Chemistry gives me the willies. But I am no more qualified to give this speech than anybody in the room, and I'll explain more about that in just a little bit. But I can tell you that Bob Maddox, those of us who knew him, will tell you that he loved Sigma Nu and he loved the whole concept of honor. In fact, he would tell me, that's why I love Sigma Nu. That's what it's all about, is honor. He also was a great mentor to me. He told me a lot of things. I remember he always told me how to be positive. You know, if you just set the world on fire, set yourself on fire with enthusiasm, the rest of the world will come around just to watch you burn. He always said, don't tell other people your troubles. Half the people don't care, and the other half are kind of glad you're having them. I knew it was after lunch, but I didn't know they were that weak. So I'm not actually ideal for this task of speaking on honor. Although I did go to Epsilon, but as Charlie Idle told you, he gave this speech 2 years ago. He's also Epsilon. So he was ideal at that time. That's why we call him Ideal Idle, always have. My professional career doesn't really recommend me for this job. I graduated with an accounting degree, but I only practiced to get through law school. Unlike Jimmy Davis, I didn't have enough personality to be a CPA. These are building, they'll get better. You don't want to fire all your ammo right at first. I was a litigator for 30 years, and certainly law is not known as a real honorable profession in this day and age, although I think it is honorable. I was trying a case in Ardmore, Oklahoma, which is in the south part of the state, where they kind of spray for Republicans down there. And I walked out of the courthouse, and this guy in overalls said, "You're a lawyer, ain't you?" And I started to say, "Well, you're not an English major, are you?" But he said, "You're a lawyer, ain't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "You know how many lawyers it takes to grease a combine?" I said, "No, how many?" He said, "One if you run him through just right." Then I went into politics. See, it's improving. Then I went into politics, which some say is the world's second oldest profession. certainly not considered real honorable, especially in this day and age. I ran for governor, as Charlie said. That wasn't a good idea. One reporter said I put the word goober in gubernatorial. Like everybody, I think if you're more than 100 miles away with a briefcase, you're smarter than anybody you know. So I hired a guy from Washington, D.C., who was a big-time expert, and his idea was we'd kick this campaign off a year in front of the election. 1 year before the election, you would announce for governor. And I said, okay. And so, I mean, he must know something. He's from Washington. I still used to believe that. And they put these push cards, they put them together. They look about the size of this piece of paper right here. And they have a incredibly inflated description of your background. I mean, if you were like homeroom chairman, they'll say you were superintendent. They'll just put anything down there. And then there's a picture of you and your family with the dog. Now, it's usually not your dog, because your dog's too ugly. They have dogs they use for this sort of thing. So we were outside Shoney's restaurant in Tulsa, actually Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, for those of you familiar with Oklahoma. And they handed me a bunch of these push cards, and they said, you go in there, it's breakfast time, it's 7 a.m. in the morning. Go around the room and shake hands with everybody, and just tell them who you are and you're running for governor. And I said, I'm not going to interrupt people having their breakfast in the morning. I'll wait for them to come out, and then I'll hand them the card, shake. That's not how you do it in politics. You got to go in there, go table to table. So I sheepishly walked in, I looked around, I saw 4 guys eating biscuits and gravy, and I kind of went over and I said, excuse me, please, but my name's Burns Hargis, and I'm running for governor. And as God is my judge, this guy looked up and said, we've already got a governor. Well, it didn't get any better after that. We went down to Coweta, Oklahoma, which is really getting rough in the woods. And I went to a place called the Pioneer Club, which is a domino parlor. I didn't know they still have domino parlors. And I go up these guys playing dominoes, about 9, imagine who they were. And by now I'm an emboldened politician. You just kind of lose all your pride pretty quickly in this business. Must be like those exotic dancers. They just don't even know they don't have clothes on. And I go in and I stick my hand in with determination. I said, hi, I'm Burns Hargis, and I'm running for governor. And this guy looked up and he said, are you a crook? And I said, no, I'm not a crook. He said, you will be. So this is a tough business in politics. What beat me in the end, I'm almost sure, was I came out for a ban on cockfighting. Now, there's parts of Oklahoma where cockfighting is a really exciting, it's almost like football. But I thought it was just kind of mainly it's about gambling. I mean, nobody much cares about seeing 2 chickens fight. It's the gambling that you do, and I just came out for a ban. Well, and I made the mistake of telling a story I'd heard from Louisiana about an enterprising sheriff who broke up a cockfighting ring down in Louisiana. And they asked him how he did it, and he said, well, I kind of did some deductive reasoning, which is kind of a 6-bit word for a sheriff from that part of Louisiana. And you can see I'm not running for office in Louisiana either. And he said, I figured that somebody really dumb was involved in this. I knew Cajuns were involved, and I knew the mafia was behind the whole thing. And they said, how in the world do you know all that? And he said, well, I knew somebody was dumb that was involved because they entered a duck in the cockfight. And he said, what makes you think Cajuns were involved? He said, somebody bet on that duck. And he said, so why do you think the mafia was behind the whole thing? He said, because the duck won. So then I was a banker after that, as they say. You know, in this day and age, your check's good, but the bank might bounce. So it's not an easy place to be. And, you know, I hear all the time, bankers don't have a heart. They do have a heart. They keep it in a jar on their desk. If you go in, you'll see it. And then I went into television as a political analyst, which my father said he was very proud of me. He said, that's like being a neutered tomcat. So what do you mean by that? He said, well, you're close to the action, but only in an advisory capacity. So how are we doing? We awake? I'm going to get to honor, believe me. I'm going to get to honor, but not just yet. because now I'm a university president. The point of all this, guys, is either I can't keep a steady job or you have no idea where your life might end up. I'm a perfect exhibit A of that point. Never did I dream I'd be a university president, especially one without academic experience. So I had to prepare for this job carefully. I read a book called A Primer for University Presidents. It's written by a guy named Peter Flawn. This is true. It's the first true thing you've heard. A guy, and that's part of our creed, isn't it? Peter Flawn was the president of the University of Texas, which is Ann's alma mater. Ann got a Latin and math degree, and we went to Italy just now, and she couldn't talk to anybody. They don't speak Latin in Italy anymore. In any event, he said, early in your career as president, you're going to be visited by the chairman of the faculty council, and there you're going to be told that faculty morale is at an all-time low. You shouldn't be too alarmed by that, because that's actually the highest faculty morale ever gets. Sometimes it'll fall below all-time low, but never, ever above all-time low. So I kind of approached it that way with my faculty, and it went fine. I was asked the question when I was being interviewed for this job, what do you think qualifies you to be a university president? And I thought about it, and I decided that my background really fit pretty well with the situation for state universities today. What you have with state universities, all of them, throughout the country, is a declining percentage of support by the state. Some states are literally down into single digits of the percentage of their budgets that come from the state. In our case, at Oklahoma State, we're at about 30% of our budget. So we're much more like a private school than we are a public school, which means that fundraising becomes a critical point for us. You know, before it used to be kind of a hobby. Today, it's a necessity. We have to behave like the private schools behave. That's why the day I walked into my office, we didn't announce it, we did that quiet phase too, Jim, a $1 billion campaign for Oklahoma State University, 5 times anything we had tried in the past. We are now at $527 million. We got a long way to go, and the dirty little secret is when we get to $1 billion, we're going to go for $2 billion. Because that's the kind of money that's required to be successful. So I think somebody that's been involved in fundraising is important. I also think that somebody who has managed large operations is important. You see, universities have to change. The model is simply not adaptable to today's realities. If you had been fast frozen in 1869, when our founders began this fraternity, and then thought out today, in terms of structure, you wouldn't have noticed much different. It's just about, all the colleges are just about the same. You pretty well study within those colleges, within those disciplines. That won't work anymore. You've got to have a much broader exposure. We have to develop the creativity and innovative skills of our students in ways never before necessary. With the emergence of China and India and everything else that's going on around the world, it is critical that our students be provided the kinds of education, the kinds of experiences to not just learn a discipline, but to also learn the communicative, the collaboration, the creative skills to be able to adapt. Because whatever job you're going to be doing for the first 3 years of your career is not the job you'll be doing after. Why? Because technology will change everything. Globalization will change everything. So I think somebody who's been involved in politics, and by the way, there's nothing more political than a college campus. Woodrow Wilson said when he ran for president of the United States, he'd been president of Princeton University. They asked him why he was running for president of the United States. He said to get out of politics. It's a very political place. And so whether we're talking about academic programs or we're talking about conference realignment and television contracts, it takes a little different kind of experience, I think, to be successful in this day and age, and they're skills that are hard to learn in the classroom. So, how do we do it? Well, we do it with honor. We come back to honor. All of us are ideal to give this speech. Any of us could do it because we're Sigma Nus, and it's at the absolute heart of this fraternity. I wasn't sure I was even going to be a Sigma Nu. I pledged Sigma Nu, but within the first week I was called to the commander's office. And I walked in there and I was sure I was about to get canned. And I didn't know what I'd done. I'd moved 25 times growing up, so I was used to change. When you're redheaded named Burns, it's hard to go to new schools. You learn to go ahead and let the toughest guy beat you up right then. If you can whip anybody, somebody tougher's coming. So I just always tried to go down early. But I go into the commander's office, and there's 4 or 5 old guys sitting there. They were probably average age of 20, 21. And the commander said to me, Pledge Hargis, you are going to run for freshman class officer. And I said, oh, thank you, sir, but I really don't do that. I'm not interested in that. And, but I'm a good teammate, and I'd sure be happy to help and work on a campaign. And he said, you're acting like you have a choice. And I said, well, I do, don't I? And he said, well, yeah, I guess you do have a choice. Your choice is to do it or leave. I said, but I don't have anywhere to go. And he said, I guess you're going to do it. And I did. And I won. It's the last thing I ever won. But because of that, it changed my life. All of a sudden, I was engaged, I was involved in our community, the university communities, the fraternity community. I was active, and I loved it. And it basically set me on a course for the rest of my life. Sigma Nu did that. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so this fraternity is very dear to me and very important to me. I learned a lot of basic values, just like you have. I learned to tell the truth. I learned to keep my promises. I learned to help my brothers. I learned that if we work together, anything's possible. It reminded me of the story of the guy who visited heaven and hell. He went to hell and he saw an incredible sight. It was a long table laden with food, with these people walking around it that were emaciated, starving to death, because they had boards tied to their arms. Then he went to heaven and he saw the same table laden with food, same boards on everybody's arms, but they were all healthy and happy. And he asked one guy, I don't understand this. In hell, they're starving to death because they got boards on their arms. How do you do it? And the guy said, simple, we feed each other. That's the way a fraternity is supposed to work. That's the way a community is supposed to work. And I think I learned to walk in the way of honor. I can't tell you that I've always been as honorable as I should have been, but I've tried. What does it really mean to be honorable? Well, it means to know the right thing, and when you see something that is wrong or an injustice, you do something about it. It's just that simple. We all honor honor. By that, I mean we all admire it when we see it. Here in Boston, we don't have to look very far. Just a few minutes walk from here, 237 years ago, Samuel Adams stood up at the real Tea Party. Samuel Adams, not Sarah Palin, at the real Tea Party, and took on the entire British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world at that time. Why? Because they saw wrong. They saw a tea tax being imposed on the colonists here in America without any say by those colonists. And Samuel Adams called a meeting just about a 5-minute walk from here at Faneuil Hall. Thousands showed up for the meeting, so they had to move it to Old South. And that was the Tea Party, where they went down to the British ship, the Dartmouth, and they threw the tea overboard. Great risk. That began the revolution which resulted in this great country. It was done just because they saw wrong and he did something about it. That's exactly what happened at VMI with our founders. Place your honor. Don't ever throw your honor overboard. If you do, you've handed in your pen for Sigma Nu. I think if we have the kind of commitment that's necessary, back home we call it like ham and eggs. The ham and eggs, the chicken is involved, but the pig is really involved and committed. I think we can make this fraternity everything those 3 great men wanted us to do. It'll depend on us and our commitment and passion to carry out our responsibilities. The kind of fraternity this will be depends on us. If we do our job, then Sigma Nu will live forever. And when we meet our Maker, I'll bet Old Bones will be there and give us a white rose. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Burns, I want to say thank you on behalf of the fraternity and the Educational Foundation for that very inspiring lecture. Brother Maddox was regent when I was elected, or when I was initiated, and I had the opportunity to meet him, and I know how much he meant to you. But you have now, I think, reached that same pinnacle with us. And the challenge that you have given is a challenge that some of the men out here that have been in initiation ceremonies over the last 2 years when I've been at charterings, when it comes to that point in the ceremony when someone says, or when the commander says, does anyone have anything to offer for the honor of Sigma Nu? I use some of the speeches, a little bit of the speech, but now I'm going to add Bones to that list. So
okay.
Thanks very much.
He'd be fun.
And this is on behalf of the Educational Foundation, commemoration of your lecture today. We thank you so much for coming and being a part of this great celebration.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great message.